Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting today's show. On the hazardous weather chart here, we've got winter weather advisory out for tonight here for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast there, Kaktovik and Barter Island. Look for winds gusting 40 miles an hour, or in some cases even higher. System dropping southeastward here in the Mackenzie River Delta. That's going to be kicking up those winds, and blowing snow could reduce visibility to less than half a mile at times. Again, later tonight, or it begins this evening and continues into or through Saturday morning. We've got wind chill advisories out here for tonight. Again, kicking in about 9 p.m., expecting the winds to increase here across the 40-mile country, eagle on down toward the eastern Alaska range there. Wind chills 40 to maybe 50 degrees below zero. Winds anywhere from 10 to 20 miles an hour. So a little bit of an increase there from the lighter wind conditions are seen Friday afternoon. And then we've got the high wind warning continues out for the Juneau area, as well as for Wrangell. Also has high wind warning out through tonight and actually through 6 p.m. Saturday, for winds gusting as high as 70 miles per hour, maybe even a little stronger there and around the Juneau-Douglas area. And then there's that wind chill advisory continues out for White Pass along the Klondike Highway toward White Pass. And that's looking with those 50 mile per hour plus winds and the temperatures in the single numbers. That's going to produce wind chills again anywhere from 35 to 45 degrees below zero. Through tonight into Saturday morning. And then the heavy snow warning also continues for the southern, or the Misty Fords and Hyder area to Stewart there in the southern panhandle over toward the border, with anywhere from 12 to 18 inches of snow. That's out until midnight tonight, and those will be the storm totals of around 12 to 18 inches. And then that system finally moves through, and it should taper off after midnight. Looking at satellite imagery, there's the system moving through there that brought the initial round of snow, and then you can already see this next system moving quite rapidly, spreading more rain and snow rain at the lower elevations, snow mostly over toward the, as I mentioned, Hyder, Misty Fords, and the Stewart area, and that pulling back to the west. It's moving through quite rapidly. Get into a break on the backside of that later tonight. Again, after midnight, this should be mostly through the area. Otherwise, up here over the Northwest Territories into the eastern interior, it looks white because the temperature is so cold, starting out anywhere from 40 to 50 degrees below zero there. And building pressures continuing to rise this afternoon over the Yukon, and that's keeping those winds strong, gusting as high as 75 miles per hour at Eldred Rock there in Lynn Canal. I've got storm warnings out in that area, and of course the high wind warnings to go along with that into the Juneau, Douglas, on down to Skagway, or on down to Wrangell. And then along the North Gulf Coast, though, clear skies. Most of this moisture staying to the south, coming up toward Kodiak this afternoon. So eventually it looks like some snow and rain will begin along the southern part of the island here at any time into this evening. And then pretty clear skies. You can see the ice edge here off the southwest coast. Otherwise, pretty good conditions right out to the Pribilof Islands, and finally pick up some clouds there. And that spreads on down toward the western Aleutians. Up to the north, not a lot going on. Some areas of light snow there along the eastern Arctic coast. Basically westerly flow coming over the top of that ridge of high pressure back to the west here over the Russian Far East. And you can see kind of the clouds there, that next system that's actually mostly off the picture there. They'll be dropping southeastward. Today we have 1 week trough coming again eastward here, bringing the areas of light snow in across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And patchy fog, though, back toward Barrow down to like about a mile visibility and fog at times during the day today. Gusty winds over the southwest interior, Yukon Delta, lower Yukon Valley area, seeing gusts anywhere from 25 to 35 miles an hour there. Could produce some blowing snow. Otherwise, lighter winds for Bristol Bay. Dry conditions across all the interior. You can see this strong Arctic high just east of the border there, south of Old Crow, extending southward, producing a very tight gradient here over the northern panhandle, producing those 70 plus mile per hour wind gusts today from Juneau on up in toward Skagway and then also channeled winds along the North Gulf Coast, not quite as strong, and then that gradient spreads out over south central Alaska, so looking at less wind today through the Madanuska Valley, what we saw yesterday. Otherwise, out in the Aleutians, really nothing going on. The main low center down to the south there, basically easterly flow across, or there is easterly flow across the Bering Sea in the Aleutians. Rain showers here from, well, actually mixed rain and snow for the Alaska Peninsula with this system. Becomes showery there from Unalaska onto Atka, Adak, and then it's back into more of a steady rain there. A little more widespread moisture out towards Shemya with temperatures in the mid to upper 30s. And for tonight, that pattern doesn't really change. May cool off enough out that way to mix it in with snow. And should stay rain, though, for the Adak-Atka area in across Unalaska. Nikolsky looking pretty wet tonight, and, of course, windy here across the southern Bering Sea. Breezy and wet for the Alaska Peninsula, a mixture of rain or snow, depending on your elevation here. Then just a few flurries, some of that remnant moisture might slip on up, and maybe produce a few flurries along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, around Kodiak, Fognak Island, possibly there, possibly Kachemak Bay, but whatever occurs in these areas will be quite light as the main bulk of the moisture stays down to the south. Again, cold high pressure here over the Northwest Territories, so those wind warnings out, Juneau, Douglas down to Wrangell. Heavy snow warning ends at midnight tonight as this moisture finally pushes off to the east. Got a breakthrough here, but this area streaming eastward looks like it'll stay, at least at this point in time, south of the area there, spread right across the Queen Charlottes, and could get a little moisture up into the Dixon entrance area, possibly a chance over the southern areas, Metlakatla, Net, possibly Heidelberg, but should stay cold and dry here over the much of the southeast coastal areas there with those strong winds. It could actually even increase tonight a little bit from what you saw today. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, and those channeled areas over the central panhandle as pressures rise to 1,050 millibars there with that center. That's about 31 inches mercury. And then it still dominates all of the interior of Alaska with fair skies, clear skies, VFR right out into the northern Bering. This system dropping southeastward will bring, again, that winter weather advisory later tonight in through tomorrow there for the eastern Arctic coast with lighter flurries back to the west. And then for Sunday, not much change here. Still flurries, but a lot less, probably less wind there, so conditions will be better, but still some lingering flurries, eastern Arctic coast. This low center brings a chance of snow to the southern panhandle once again. It stays windy, maybe dropping off a little bit here over the northern panhandle from what you saw. We'll see today, tonight, and tomorrow again. So winds diminishing tomorrow night, continuing into Sunday. A lot less wind here over southern Alaska, less gradient, but still dry. Maybe some rain or snow showers into Kodiak Island. And this weakening front keeps it damp over the eastern Aleutians, unsettled for the Pribilofs. And a trough rotating up could bring some rain and snow into Kodiak Island. Of course, clouds with that. Showers over the Aleutians. Looking at lows for tonight, again, anywhere from 25 to 45 below here over the eastern interior areas, except where the winds pick up, be a little milder, and single numbers here along the coast. Otherwise, 30s, mild for the Alaska Peninsula, panhandle anywhere from 0 to 20 above. And for highs tomorrow, teens to lower 30s for the southeast coast, rising a little above, edging upward each day here over the eastern interior. And the low temperatures for Sunday morning, a little bit milder, say 25 to low 35 below, maybe still down toward 40 below for the Copper River Basin at Gulkana, and then milder mid-30s to upper 30s, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island. Highs in the afternoon, 20s to mid-30s for the Panhandle, cold over the interior and milder for the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, we've got an area of IFR there, south side of St. Lawrence Island, into the Yukon Delta coast, and then VFR to the south, and then picking up the marginal to IFR here with a band of moisture in that boundary just south of St. Paul Island, back into the western Aleutians, and a break here, west central Aleutians, and picking up IFR again, roughly at about Atka, and then the south side of the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, up to Kodiak Island, becoming marginal, good VFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, all the interior here, IFR, Eastern Arctic Coast, VFR across the southeast coast. This area of moisture will start to edge its way eastward. You can see by afternoon, almost to Dixon entrance, not quite though, And then back to IFR here along Kodiak Island. Stays VFR over the interior again. Less IFR up there over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with marginal conditions back to roughly Wainwright, then VFR. And widespread IFR here over the southern Bering Sea northward into the Pribilofs now. VFR over the far northern Bering, down in along the southwest coast of Bristol Bay staying VFR. Sunday morning, a little bit more extensive IFR here along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Otherwise, no change up there for the North Slope. Interior, no change. Good VFR again for the entire weekend coming up. IFR a little more extensive here across Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula on the Pacific side. Marginal on the Bering Sea side. IFR, central Bering, Pribilofs back westward and then southward there, west of Kiska Island for Shimei and Attu, otherwise marginal. And then for Sunday afternoon, again staying VFR, all of interior Alaska, Gulf here, in across the northern panhandle, and marginal VFR up there over the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, becoming marginal for Kodiak from the IFR earlier, and then IFR south side of the peninsula on into the central Aleutians. This area retreating back to the west over the Bering Sea. Marginal VFR central southern panhandle to Dixon Entrance, VFR on up to the north. And for Anaktuvik, good VFR tomorrow. All the passes looking really good for the Alaska Range as well. Rainy Anaktuvik, Adigan for the Brooks Range, but windy here for the central Alaska Range. And for Isabel and Mentasta, good VFR, wide open, ceilings visibility is unlimited again for Tanita and Portage, as well as Chilkoot and White, although staying turbulent with that tight gradient and those channeled outflow winds. It'll be pretty turbulent across the passes. And for the freezing levels, with the cold outflow here coming southward out of northwest Canada with those well below zero temperatures, we've got the surface all the way down to Prince of Wales Island, 2,000 feet there cutting across Dixon Entrance in the northern Queen Charlottes. And then right across the Gulf here, just across Sitkinak, 2,000 feet into the Alaska Peninsula, 4,000 feet though, nudging northward there over the eastern Aleutians. And then this area of warm air aloft associated with the big upper level ridge that's slowly advancing and weakening and advancing east-southeast, should settle in over the northwest interior. And for the icing threat, just possibly some, just a slight chance of some icing grazing the central and eastern Arctic coast up there tomorrow. Really nothing too significant. None over the interior. And then this area moisture with that boundary lifting northward, Kodiak Island, mainly on the east side, and a band across the Alaska Peninsula up to around the Pribilofs, and then a little bit more extensive out here over the southwest Bering and the western Aleutians. And that same zone extends eastward there to the Queen Charlottes, and again gradually trying to push northward. Might not be quite that far north by tomorrow afternoon. And moving on to the jet stream here, again that moisture coming northward due to kind of a southwest flow here, something of a ridge coming up, but the main jet right across the Queen Charlottes and then back to the southeast, so that making the southern southeast coast vulnerable. Otherwise, strong high pressure aloft continues here to dominate all of interior Alaska, northwest Canada, northern Bering Sea into the Chukchi. And then some lows out here, but the main jet well to the south there. This branch only at about 20 knots wrapping back around. We've got 50 knot easterlies there across the Norton Sound Yukon Delta area. And at 9,000 feet, easterly flow 20 to 30 knots, some cases as high as 40 knots, 25 for the Aleutians, 30 knots southwest of Kodiak, and pretty light at this elevation over the Panhandle, except 30 knots into the southern areas. 3,000 feet, about the same pattern. East to west flow here, basically up to 40 to 50 knots, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, southwest coast, lighter under that ridge over the interior areas. Taking a look at turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop here, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and continuing here over the northern southeast coast, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, maybe back to about Yakutat.
We have cleaned over 1,500 miles of shoreline now.
Basically, it comes down to just human muscle. I mean, we use chainsaws and knives.
We find stuff from like Russia and China and Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia. It really doesn't matter where it comes from. We all just have to clean it up.
Our goal right now in the next 10 or 11 days before the end of this year is just to see how much we can collect before we get to remove it.
What you see on the beach is a fraction of what's out there. You can pretty much break it down into 3 or 4 things. Water bottles, a lot of water bottles, styrofoam, fishing nets, fishing buoys. And that's 99% of what you find on the beach. Basically just go along with chainsaws and muscle and get the garbage, put it in sacks, and then from there we haul it up above the log jam so it's out of any heavy surf or winter storms if it's going to stay there for the year, and put it in super sacks. So yeah, we just progressively work down the coast, just day in and day out.
We have like daily goals for ourselves that, like, if we're working at a pretty good rate, we like to keep on pace with about, like, I don't know, about 20 to 25 super sacks a day. So this is pile 102, and in this pile right now we have 2 super sacks and 1 set of buoys. June 23rd here, this is what we've done today. We're up to 25 super sacks on the day, and I think for now we'll call it and just keep cleaning until tomorrow.
My name is Hannah, and I represent a organization in Japan called Japan Environmental Action Network. With over 20 people working together to clean up the beach, this is amazing. Like, we all need to work together to, clean up the beach as much as possible. So like every single time I go back to Japan, I talk to the fishermen, and the fishermen's like, it's a joke, but they're like, if you find any buoy with my logo, you gotta bring it back, and it's like, always looking out for that stuff.
The crew's awesome. I mean, we're all skiers or snowboarders, and we're all friends. I mean, we're all good friends. My dad started it. He's the man behind the desk. He makes the ball roll for sure. He works hard. He doesn't give up easy, which is good.
This stuff is uplifted quite a ways during the earthquake. Well, I think my bag's about full already. Yeah. I'm gonna take a quick look back in here. Somebody else is back here. The thing about marine debris is it's kind of a hidden problem. Unless you're out there, especially on these remote beaches that are so heavily impacted, people don't see it. I remember probably a good 20 years ago, I was out on the outside of Montague Island, flew out there, and I was just utterly astounded by all the garbage out there. You walk out there and you wade through this stuff and you go, this isn't right, this shouldn't happen.
I think a lot of it's just awareness. I mean, I've been boating out here for a long time, and I wasn't even aware of how extensive the marine debris problem is out here, but it's a consumer world out there for sure. I mean, I don't know where people's values are, I guess, but mine is you got to kind of have a little bit of respect for the environment, and considering we live in it, especially in Alaska. I mean, a lot of people like the outdoors and like to be part of the outdoors. That's why they live here, and it's they don't necessarily want to see it trashed.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis showing continued westward progression of the outer ice edge here due to the persistent easterly to east-northeasterly flow, and that's going to continue through the weekend for the most part, and kind of a warmer current keeping this area a little bit open up in that region, and even Bristol Bay starting to see an expansion of the ice. Of course, Cook Inlet, as long as temperatures stay cold, it'll continue to see an increase in the sea ice here through the weekend. And going to the marine forecast, storm warnings continue tonight for Northern Link Canal, and also heavy freezing spray warnings continue through tomorrow for the same areas there. But coming down to 45 knots tomorrow, seas 12 feet. Easterly gales on the north coast, easterly small craft advisories on the south coast, and northerly gales for Stevens Passage, northeast 20 for Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas. Next day, Sunday, southeast 20 for Clarence Strait, easterlies still 25 to 30 knots there for the south coast. Big drop off in the winds here on the north coast, 15 to 25 with seas right around 10 feet. And minimum gales now, but still 50-knot gusts there for Northern Link Canal with seas at about 10 feet, 30 knots for Stevens Passage. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, northeast at 15, but easterlies at 30 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 11-foot seas. Minimum gales here for the western coast, and for the Barren Islands, east 40 knots, turn northeast at 40 for Kachemak Bay. Brisk 30-knot northeast winds for southern Cook Inlet and 20 knots north of the Forelands. For the Sunday outlook, northeast at about 10 here, so lightening up a little bit there for the northern inlet, and still small craft advisories here, southern Cook Inlet, 30 knots, dropping off 10 knots there for Kachemak Bay. Northeast 25 now, so a general decrease in the winds most areas on Sunday. Northeast 20 for the North Gulf Coast, north 15, 3-foot seas, Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, full gales there tomorrow, all the way down to Castle Cape here. East-northeast 40 knots, seas at 16 to 20 feet. Alaska Peninsula winds right out of the east at 35 knots with 13 to 16-foot seas. And Bristol Bay and northeasterlies gusting to 45 knots tomorrow, 6-foot seas. And then for Sunday, those come down to 25 sustained. Going easterly, 25 here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Lighter, diminishing winds here south side with east at 20, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, coming down to 25 knots right up the east side of Kodiak Island, but those minimum gales holding on to Shelikof Strait. For the Fox Islands, easterlies 25 to 30 for tomorrow, with seas 13 to as high as 17 feet there. Adak Atka, northeast 25 to 30, and then 30-knot winds all the way out to Shimianat-2, with seas under 20 feet. And for Sunday, easterlies 20 knots now, pretty uniform here from the western Aleutians all the way into just about Nikolsky, and actually across the Fox Islands, all easterlies at 20 knots coming up with seas running 7 to 13 feet. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, got gales flying tomorrow. Northeast 35 knots, turn easterly at 35 for the Pribilofs. Otherwise, brisk wind advisories and small craft advisories for the northern Bering Sea right up into Norton Sound. Then for Sunday, northeast come down to 15 knots for Norton Sound, about 20 for St. Lawrence Island. Brisk wind small craft advisories here for the southwest coast, as well as the Pribilofs and the northern Bering Sea, east 30 with 13-foot seas. And moving on up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, we've got that disturbance dropping off to your east there, but close enough to kick those winds up to 30 knots with the wind weather advisory here over the inland areas for tonight into tomorrow. So east 30 knots tomorrow, and then 20 knots here back to the west, dropping off to just 10 for the central coast, light southwest on the western coast there, and then from Cape Beaufort on down to the Bering Strait looks pretty light and variable. And for Sunday, those turn northerly at about 15 knots, Cape Beaufort down across the Chukchi Sea to the Strait, and east at 10 for much of the Arctic coast, except the far eastern zone here, it'll be northwest at 10, kind of really getting light and variable wind pattern here on the east side coming up for Sunday. For tonight again, high wind warning continues for Juneau on down toward Wrangell, Petersburg, those areas gust 70 miles per hour, very tight gradient here, this strong Arctic high over the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Snow ending, so winter storm warning for heavy snow ends there for the Misty Fords and Stewart Hyder areas, with drier conditions coming in. More storminess here slipping eastward, and that should stay mostly south of the Panhandle through tomorrow. And the winds 1,050 millibar high, slowly coming down, again coming under storm force. No change over the interior, unsettled for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and Kodiak. And that pattern holds with some snow showers or Kodiak, weak front out in the Aleutians, and chance of snow or rain over the southern panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.